Hello and welcome to our next talk in the March Accelerant Research Virtual Insights Conference. Thank you all for continuing to join us. Hopefully you've been able to refill your coffee and get a snack. One second, let me flip my presentation here. I'll just unplug my monitor. Okay, that should work. Here we go, one second. Sorry guys. Let me get my screen shared here. And I'll be right with you. Okay. All right, this should be good. So thank you all for joining us, and just to reiterate some of our ground rules. Once again, we're at the mercy of tech, so please be patient, please be respectful with all of us as people are logging in and logging out. And also just use this opportunity to network, engage, interact with others. It's been a long year of not being able to see our colleagues in person and kind of share ideas. So take this opportunity to follow up with someone if you see some ideas that are interesting for you that you'd like to learn more about. So we have a very exciting talk for you to hear today. Oh, crap. I'm having technical difficulties right now. But I'm gonna figure it out, guys. So we have a really exciting talk for you today. We're going to hear about ethnography and the power of the pivot. And we're going to hear from Heidi Carrion, who is at SureTape. She's Manager of Insights and Design. And then also going to hear from Jillian Wells, who's the CEO and founder of 3E, which is Employment, Engagement, and Experience. So I'm going to hand it over to you guys. Really looking forward to it. And I will be back at the top of the hour.
Thank you, Maureen. It says I can't share my screen while you're still sharing. Okay, hopefully now I can.
Let me stop sharing and then let me make you the host. Bill, do you need to make Heidi or Jillian the host?
I got it. I think I got it now.
You got it now? Okay, there we go.
Can you see it? Excellent.
I can see it.
Okay. Well, thank you, Maureen, and thank you, Bill, for inviting us to present here today. Appreciate it. I love events like this where we can hear what other people are working on, so thanks for sharing that STEMI research, Bill. And I'm actually getting ready to use AI for the first time for qualitative research, so appreciate the insights there. A little scary, huh? So, I'm Heidi Carrion, and I'm really excited to present today with my longtime friend, Jillian Wells. To start with, I'm going to tell you a little about myself. I've had kind of a varied career path to get to where I am. So, probably like a lot of you out there, I started my education and career in the life sciences. I did a couple of internships during my biology degree. I studied terrestrial snails for one summer, and then another summer I spent at Kennedy Space Center studying the ground controls for growing plants in space. And they actually use something similar to this on the International Space Station now, so I like to think that I contributed greatly to this as an intern. So intuitively, my next step in my career path was to learn everything there was to know about candles. I was hired as an R&D chemist in the Candle Sciences group of Bath and Body Works. And science might be a little bit of a misnomer here, very light science, but it was a great job. My first splash into the CPG world. A lot of benchtop work, but also worked extensively with international candle vendors in Guatemala and China. But it was in this job where I first experienced my first focus group, and from the beginning, that's what I wanted to do. I was smitten from the beginning and wanted to figure out how to be part of that. Then took a little trip to a chemistry startup, and this picture pretty much describes my career path there. Left there, went and pursued an MBA, and then started my first job in consumer research with an industrial design consultancy called Nottingham Spurk. I was there for a decade. And with that, this is really where I cut my teeth in consumer research. We had a focus group facility in-house, and I was a moderator from day one, so it was a lot of just learning everything on the job, being thrown into situations, learning a lot from our clients, seeing something in one proposal that I'm like, oh, I'll try this next time. So very, very, very hands-on, trial by fire for sure. And a lot of the research work that I did was more about stimuli creation and giving the designers something to work with, and finding those pain points to meet consumer needs with product design. Also did some quantitative research there, but I'm largely a qual girl. So now I work for SureTape Technologies, more commonly known as the Duct Tape Company. We have a couple other brands as well, as you can see at the bottom of the slide here, Frog Tape and T-Rex, and anything I'm very proud of, Easy Mounts, look it up. But with the Duct Tape Company, I started out in R&D. So I was a consumer researcher placed with scientists, a lot of interesting nuances there, and I'm going to be talking about that throughout my presentation. I quickly saw a need to be using consumer research to answer questions early on in the development cycle before we spent way too much money or followed the wrong insights. So I really wanted to use consumer research to reach out to our end users, whether it was a stucco contractor or a cat owner, or so many different places that people use tape and different types of tape. But it was kind of a hard sell at first. Not everyone was on board, so I'm going to be talking about that. So to level set, I know most of you are researchers, so you probably know what ethnography is, but I want to make sure that we're defining this. So ethnography. Traditionally, ethnography looked like this. Moving to the jungle, living among the natives, the indigenous people, learning the language, observing. And as much as I would love for that to actually be my life, let's be practical. We're marketing researchers. So when we say ethnography, we mean more show me, tell me, walk me through, in situ research, in context. A lot of times it's happening in a dining room, around the kitchen table, on a couch, or for me, a lot of the work that I've done recently actually has been on farms. So my message today actually is a little bit different. Anyone who has done ethnographic research or contextual interviewing understands the research value of doing this. But what I wanted to amplify today is the ability to lead from where you are in an organization. And I found that ethnographic research has been a really valuable tool for that. So yes, allowing the consumer to guide a collective journey. So I'd like to hear from you for a minute. Has anyone out there had some specifically difficult categories to research? Maybe some difficult product categories, or difficult maybe end users to find? And we heard from Gary in his question to Bill about a new to the world innovation, and that's kind of the world that I used to live in. So that can always be difficult. Yeah, so COVID-19 vaccines, they're upon us. How do you ever find research for something that happened 100 years ago? So that's a really interesting one to research. Yeah, so some interesting ones there. Difficult populations for sure. So for me, one of the challenging things from the beginning was duct tape. I mean, it's our flagship product. But how do you get into the mindset of someone getting ready to do a duct tape project? Unless you're doing something like this, so crafting is a very specific segment for us. This is actually our Stuck at Prom winner last year. We host this scholarship contest every year where college or high school age men and women can make a prom dress or a tuxedo and submit it into the contest. And this was the winner last year, very topical dress, a really beautiful creation, but she spent 400 hours, used over 41 rolls of duct tape, so you could say she planned her duct tape project. This is actually going on now, so feel free to check it out at Stuck at Prom. So patent planned for sure, but normally, if you're using duct tape, to cobble something together, you're not doing much planning. It was a low involvement purchase. It's a junk drawer staple. Maybe it lives in your garage if you can find it at all. It's a grudge use item usually. You're mad usually when you're using it. Whatever it is has broken, or you're just having a bad day. And it's always a substitute for what you really want. You want the new part. You want the new thing. But we also hear very powerful stories of how duct tape has saved the day for people in so many different ways, so many different uses. So it seemed intuitive that doing in-home research for duct tape would be a great way to research the consumer mindset. We might not really catch the consumer when they're getting ready to use it specifically, but we can see, where they keep it, some things they have used it for, to repair, to patch, to whatever they're doing, secure. We have like 5 different words we use to describe how duct tape is used, but what are those things specifically they're securing, repairing, hanging, and waterproofing? So we hear so many stories about how it saves the day that we know is powerful. It's just a really unsung hero. We thought we could do, or I thought we could do in-home research to see where it's being stored, and to see these things, and just to understand the consumer mindset for when you have to fix something. When would you grab glue? When would you grab duct tape? Would you actually go for this brand over this brand for a certain reason? So ethnography, or doing research in home, seemed like a really good solution. But as I mentioned before, I was part of R&D at the time. And I worked with a really talented group of chemists, very good at their craft. Almost all have PhDs in different fields of adhesive chemistry and rheology and big words like that. They spend their days thinking about the nuances of adhesives, whether it's a hot melt or an acrylic or a silicone, and all the different properties, the peel, the attach, the shear, what can they add to it to enhance these properties, and largely a lot of cost savings. How can we make more efficiently for less money? Enter me. I'm a consumer researcher. I get there's a lot that goes into tape and all the other products we work on, but how do we talk about these, and how can we make consumers understand that it's because of this additive? They don't have to know it's that additive, but how do we translate these very physical properties to consumer benefits? And even more importantly, how or what will people pay more for? So, we didn't speak the same language, really. They didn't get me, I didn't get them. Cultural backgrounds, like any R&D department, we had PhD chemists from far-flung places like Pittsburgh and Turkey and India and China, Egypt. So just a lot of different, we also have 2 different locations, so to mention that. I was in Cleveland, Ohio, reporting into this group that's in Hickory, North Carolina. So just a lot of different nuances that made it hard for us to understand each other. So I think that's not unique though. A lot of times as researchers, we're kind of treated more like internal consultants in our businesses. So what I want to talk about is your personal journey. This isn't about the customer journey. This is about you and how you can kind of grow your own business internally and gain credibility and build value for others. So I convinced our vice president for us to do this in-home research together. And at first, it had a really weirdness factor for everyone. Like for me, I've done this kind of research for many years, so I've kind of gotten over the weirdness of going to somebody's house and talking to them in depth about a topic for an hour and a half and then never ever seeing them again. But to people that are new to this, it was really weird. They're like, what do you mean we're going to houses? This is a super weird thing. And that's really what I want to talk about, is giving advice for when you're bringing non-researchers into a research setting, especially an in-home environment, how you need to be very intentional. So this is about tactics, not strategy at all. But tactically, there's things you can do, other things that I found helpful to set the guidelines and have a more successful research experience. I'm trying to avoid the when S towards T happens moments. So you need to set clear expectations, obviously. For the researcher, I found that making a guideline sheet was super helpful. And I printed this out and gave everyone a paper copy, and that's in the next couple of slides I'm going to talk about what those guidelines were. But make a guideline sheet. Anytime you're doing something new for the first time, you want to hear from experts that have been there before and have done this already. So it's helpful to know what to expect. You need to set a schedule and schedule the people on your side, on the client side, for when they're supposed to arrive at each place. You don't want to have more than 4 people inundating the interviewee. So you need to be pretty strict about the schedule. Make sure you have an even spread of people from the client side. If possible, you should have it in a different city. It's so easy to get pulled away for a line trial or just the commitments you have in your day-to-day job. And what you're asking for from your colleagues is their time. So to get them to invest the time, you need the upfront commitment. If you can do it in a different city, that's really a great way to go. And finally, just get out of the way. This isn't about you translating your impressions to your coworkers and your colleagues. This is about everyone being on this collective journey and them seeing things for themselves and them seeing the context and walking away with their own impressions. They don't have to all be the same, but allowing them to guide their own journey for themselves. So as far as the guidelines, this is actually what I gave them. There's 5 of these here. But first of all, the roles. We need eyes, ears, and a mouth. The interviewer will be the mouth, and they'll be doing most of the question asking. I'm sure most of you know it can be super uncomfortable in an interview setting if everyone's firing questions at the interviewee. So it really works best to have the interviewer leading the discussion, and she or he will give you time to ask questions in certain places, but hold your questions until you're asked. But your job is to be the eyes and the ears. So you're there to observe, look for what people are saying. Maybe there's nonverbal cues, taking lots of notes, taking photos. We'll have a video camera set up, so make sure that it's in the best position. Check it a few times, make sure it hasn't stopped recording. If there's an extension cord, we have to manage that. But eyes and ears is really the job of the non-researchers. Second, and this is the most important one, is that we are there to listen. The interviewee is the subject matter expert here. It's their experience. We're not there to educate or sell them about our products. They'll have misconceptions, and that's okay. We need to better understand why they think that way, what's confusing. Don't correct it. Allow them to explain to you, why they think the way they do. So super important there to let them be the expert. Number 3, be comfortable with the silence. And as a moderator, this is a skill you have to learn. So probably a lot of you already know this guideline. But for others that haven't done research before, it can be uncomfortable when you let somebody finish a thought and then give them time to rethink about what they just said. But that's when you get the good stuff. So really resist the urge to ask follow-up questions right away. Let them think. Let the room be silent for a few seconds if needed, but be comfortable with that. So number 4, try to avoid the word why when you do get to ask questions. Especially when you're in an in-home setting, the word why can make the interviewee a little defensive sometimes. So think about starting questions with, tell me more about, describe to me a time when, and sometimes you can restate what they just said to you so they can maybe hear for themselves the inconsistency. And that's much better. It comes across a little bit more gently than to question somebody about why they're doing something. So try to avoid the word why if possible. And number 5, again, I'm being extremely tactical here, not strategic, but remember that we're guests. Don't ask to use the restroom. Offer to take off your shoes. Don't overstay your welcome. Don't be too early or don't be too late. Don't hand out business cards. We're not keeping in touch. This is an hour and a half interaction. It's transactional. We care very much about what they're telling us for that hour and a half, but that's it. We're not going to keep in touch. And we don't really want to leave even our brand with them. So try to make the interviewee feel comfortable, even though we really are intruding into their personal space. So those are the 5. Here they are, all in one place. The do's, like assign roles, just interview skills here. We're listening, we're comfortable with the silence, how to phrase questions, and remembering that we're guests. The don'ts, pretty simple. Don't correct them, don't try to educate and sell, don't ask questions throughout. So how did it go? Well, I want to report that it went phenomenally. This has probably been one of my most successful research experiences that I've had throughout my career. I got lucky with recruiting, honestly. So the interview that my vice president joined in on was a complete emotional minefield. The guy that we were interviewing had just gone through a divorce, used to own a farm, had a million ways he used to use duct tape on his farm. He also talked about how he used to be really into dirt bike racing and used duct tape in all these ways that I didn't know about. I don't think anybody on our team really realized the interaction with mud we should be thinking about. But you tape your number on your shirt, you seal between your jeans and your boots to keep the mud out. So we learned some really interesting things about just surprising ways duct tape was used. We also learned a lot about consumer impressions. Like one thing that we've been undervaluing is some tape has sticky edges, once you take the roll wrap off, of course, but where it's fuzz and hair can stick to it, and we hadn't really heard before that's an indicator of low quality, so that makes us rethink how we're really cutting and slicing the tape on the line. So we learned some interesting things. We actually have modified some of our test methods from doing in-home interviews like this. But really for me, it was more about full engagement, and now the team and I were on the same team. Research was no longer just a step in the Gantt chart, but could actually be additive to their process. So then they started reaching out to me, trying to pick my brain about how we should approach different things and how we can use research as a tool. And research became really a tool in their toolbox, and it democratized the whole idea of using consumer research to answer questions. So I think this worked, and I would encourage you to use these guidelines when you're bringing non-researchers along for the journey. Now, another part of qual research that's super important is objectivity. And there's no better way to do that than to have a third party conducting interviews. So at this point, I want to introduce my co-presenter, Jillian, who is the most skilled interviewer I know.
Well, thank you so much for that, Heidi. Just to give a little background about me and where that all came from to even get to the point of being a good interviewer. I actually started my career in television news at Fox Carolina. I am a journalist by trade. I then expanded into meteorology. So I did both weather reporting and also news reporting. Now everyone loves to talk about the weather and ask you questions about it, but those interviewing skills really came in on the journalist side of things when I'm trying to interview people, get the details about a story so that I can put that information together to then present it obviously to the viewers. So journalism is in my blood, and asking all those right questions is part of that. From television news, I then moved into sales in the ever glamorous toilet paper line of things. So I sold toilet paper, boxes, janitorial supplies, went from TV to TP, if you will. But at the same time, as anyone may know in sales, there's a lot of questioning that needs to be done. You are constantly speaking with your customers, even gaining new customers, by asking those right questions, finding the pains that are out there so that you can help provide solutions to solve the problems. So having to ask those questions and having that constant communication is a key role. Now from there, I was actually recruited by one of my clients to become the director of their multi-million-dollar fitness club. So I then became managing over 70 employees across 7 different departments. So I continued obviously asking questions of our customers and our members, but my role then switched into interviewing and keeping that connection and those questions among my employees, so that I had a pulse of what was happening while they were working, what was their experience out there, were they engaged, and keeping them engaged. And that had to be part of obviously that interviewing and asking questions process. From there, I took on the most difficult job ever of being a stay-at-home mom, which I, of course, then became the person who was being asked all the questions by 2 young little boys. But it was an awesome experience doing that. I then got back into the corporate world as a recruiting and training manager, where I then managed our nationwide remote team. On that side, I, of course, had to do the recruiting, the interviewing, the selection process, onboarding, bringing new people in and going through the training. And then from that piece, I was their engagement person. Again, we had a remote team nationwide across 3 different time zones. So being in constant communication, asking all those right questions, interviewing them on a daily basis to see the pulse of everything and how we could improve, what we could do to improve their engagement altogether. So this slide looks like just a hot mess, if you ask me, which is why I then decided to start my own business of E3, which is employee engagement and experience, and put all of that together so that I can work with businesses on that third party level, like Heidi said, and coming in and asking those questions and doing those interviews and allowing the employees to speak with me as a non-biased person, so that they can really open up and feel free to share exactly what they're thinking, so that we can then draft ways and come up with strategies to help improve the experience overall, and the culture, if you will, throughout the organization. Now, there are ways that a lot of people do this. There's surveys. We've already seen that in the role that can play with Bill's presentation earlier. And there are great times to use this strategy. However, I do strongly disagree when it comes to having to find that personal connection. The reason why is that not every question can be answered fully with an agree or disagree answer, especially when you're trying to get input, feedback, insight into something specific and on a personal level. And that's where interviewing and taking time to really sit down and ask questions is going to be your best tactic, if you will. So what are some of the best ways to do that? Well, some of your best practices is first and foremost realizing it's not about you. Heidi touched on this a little bit ago. By asking the question, sitting back, being quiet and listening, the person you're talking to essentially becomes that expert at that point. So whatever you say doesn't really matter. You're trying to listen and hear what they have to say. And believe me, it's not an easy thing. There's actually a study in 2018 from the Mayo Clinic that they found when patients are first describing their main medical concerns to their physicians, the physicians actually interrupt them within 11 seconds on average. By the way, the researchers also found that the patients need on average 29 seconds to fully explain what's going on. So even the people who are having to listen and figure out what's going on, what's wrong, so they can prescribe something to fix you, have trouble listening. So again, it's not something that's easy to do, but it is something you can be cognizant of to remember. And listening well isn't just talking less, it's actually asking and responding and taking the time to focus on what's being said instead of thinking of what's the next question I'm going to ask or what am I going to assume or interpret about the person that I'm talking to. Looking and having more interest in that person's interests rather than judging them, if you will, or thinking about your own interests. Again, basically just it's not about you. That leads then to the next best practice is asking good questions. What are you really trying to find out here? What is the end game? What's the goal or the outcome that you're looking for? And use that to craft your questions so you can find the true answers to what you're wanting to find. But that also means don't just make questions to get someone and lead them into saying what you want them to say. Again, they're the expert. So ask those good questions, which are open-ended questions. Allow the interviewee the opportunity to expound on their experience, give their input on something, listen like we just talked about. A lot of times you will hear more than what you expected. When you let that person go, like Heidi said, pause, let them rethink what they have just said. That usually opens them up to talk even more. And suddenly you are hearing things that you didn't expect to hear. You may find a new pain, a new concern, or other insight that's out there that you didn't even originally know about. So that's when you can respond with good follow-up questions and dig in and get some more details there. Lastly, you do want to make sure you are taking notes, but not just on paper. You really need to take note of not only the words being spoken, but the nonverbal actions as well. And again, you may uncover more than what you expected when you were reading that person. Are they nervous about a certain topic? Are they aggravated when you mention something specific? What are the emotional levels that come out in that conversation and in that interview? And then, of course, taking those, drafting more questions, working around the information that you're getting, you can really gain some valuable insight and really get an idea of that level of engagement, their experience, or lack thereof. So basically just being observant is another great tip when it comes to doing your interviews. And why is this all so important? Active listening and interviewing isn't just for customers, it's also for your employees. And it's extremely beneficial when you take note of what's happening within your own organization to see how those employees are engaged and what their experience is like. Because studies show only 13% of employees are actually actively engaged. What that means is that 87% are disengaged. And when you put numbers on that, it's actually $550 billion in annual productivity loss. That's huge. So it is really important not just to listen to those customers, but also to the people that are in your organization doing it. Consider this. In the beginning, when you start that recruiting and interviewing process, you spend countless hours and time looking through resumes, finding the right people, doing assessment tests, sitting down, interviewing, asking those questions. You want to find the very best person to fit that role. And chances are that person you're interviewing is also interviewing you and others as well to find that perfect fit. It's really, though, day 2+ that matters once you bring them on board. You need to make sure that you're courting them, if you will, like you did when you were in the recruiting process. Kind of like the first 3 months, like the next 3 months. Keep treating them in that way and showing them and doing all the things you promised in that recruiting process. And that way you can not just bring them on board, but keep them on board throughout the process. And there's good reason for that. You want to keep your employees engaged and have a positive work experience because it costs money and time. According to a Forbes magazine, when employees' engagement needs are not met, there's a higher likelihood of turnover, of course, but what that looks like, it actually costs 1.5 times that person's original salary. When you consider that actual cost, plus the time spent re-recruiting, interviewing, hiring, training again, the job not being done while that person is gone, or other employees having to assume additional roles, you really can't afford not to put emphasis on your employee engagement. Not to mention that studies show that engaged teams obviously have lower turnover. They also have 21% greater profitability, 17% higher productivity, and 10% higher customer ratings than disengaged teams. And this is where that effective interviewing can come into play, especially when you have a third-party person. Sometimes it's hard to see the forest through the trees, and that third-party person can come in, ask those difficult questions, and really gain that actual insight and feedback because we're a non-biased person. It's a confidential setting. That person I speak with, they don't have to worry about me firing them. I have no say in their job, but what I can do is take the information that they have and turn it over to the leadership team so that those ideas and suggestions may be implemented, but their pains are also heard. And let me just say, when someone on leadership brings in someone like myself and that third party to come in and hear what their people have to say, right then and there, you are engaging your employees. You are showing them that you care, that you want to hear what they have to say. And that is the first step sometimes it takes in making sure that your people are engaged. And bottom line with that, happy employees equal happy customers, which is what we all want. And it's really a win-win for everyone.
So now that we've spent the last 33 minutes talking about being face-to-face, one-on-one with people, plot twist, 2020 happened. And I'm sure a lot of you felt this way, that a really critical tool that we used was taken away from us. So for me, at the end of 2019, we had a company reorg and we created an insights and innovation team. So that was like November 2019. So 4 months in, COVID shut down. We were trying to chart new waters anyways, trying to figure out how we fit together as a new team, how we fit into the organization. But our charge was to explore new categories and find new growth for the company outside of where we already had product categories. So we did a lot of trend work and a lot of brainstorming and trying to share our own experience. We really got to a point where we needed the consumer. We needed an immersive experience to step outside of our own biases and experiences in our kitchen actually, and see other people, how they're dealing with things, what their work and backgrounds are. So this was a great place where I would have normally gone to in-home interviewing, but we couldn't do that anymore. So I reached out to some people in the industry, and every time I reach out to people, everyone is so helpful, so I always appreciate that. But reached out to people that were in similar roles to me and also in the industrial design world, and learned a couple things that people have been doing. Everyone's doing online bulletin boards. That seems to be the obvious go-to to do a lot of asynchronous work, collect pictures and photos, and those are okay. One interesting suggestion that I heard was you might want to think about recruiting 2 people per household, because with one person you're getting like this person talking into the phone and then you're also seeing their stuff, but not at the same time. With a second person in the household as part of the interview, they can film me and my stuff. I can point to things and talk about it much more contextually. So that was a good suggestion, I thought. Haven't done it yet, but I thought that was a really good suggestion. But for me, the key was how do I drive engagement from the client side? I've had online bulletin boards before, and everyone has logins, but nobody really uses them. People might, check in for a few minutes, explore, just completely overwhelming, honestly. So never really got much engagement from the client side. Everyone wanted to wait for the final report. So I worked actually with an outside agency, and we came up with a methodology and just a set of things we did to really drive engagement. So here are the 5 things that we did, and I think this worked pretty well. Like I said, we're an innovation team. We're heading into product development. So this may not work for everyone, but for us, it was so critical for all of us to have the stimuli, and at the same time for us to have the ideas and build. So the first thing we did on the front end, just at the core, this was an online bulletin board with some follow-up IDIs. So really not earth-shattering at all. We had 25 people on the online bulletin board, and then we did 4 IDIs at the end. But for our team, on the front end, we had a framing workshop where we defined, what is an insight, like something that basic. What is the insight and what are the goals? What are we trying to do here? And then we assigned each person on my team 3 to 4 respondents to follow through the bulletin board. And that was a really great way to kind of right-size the workload and to make it approachable so that I could log on and see what Kara said today and then what she said tomorrow, and I can remember what her kitchen looks like, and it made it much more approachable and I think much more helpful and actionable for us. We also had a worksheet from the beginning as part of the framing workshop. Actually, is going through the worksheet, but to tangibly write down what information we're looking for, and that kind of helped. It wasn't mandatory, of course, to do the worksheet, but I think it helped guide what to even do. After the online bulletin board was complete, we had a workshop again. It's like workshops is the answer to everything here, but I think it is the coming together and discussing what it is you saw and learned. So we had this workshop to collect what we learn and to understand what we know and what we still want to learn from these people, kind of categorize that. And that helped craft the discussion guide that we used for the IDIs. And then we picked 4 of the respondents. So they weren't the most glamorous ones, they weren't the ones with the most beautiful kitchens, but they're the ones that we felt like we really wanted to continue to explore with. They had some great workarounds we wanted to explore. So we picked these 4 people, and then we all participated, or we all observed at least, when the moderator did the in-depth interview with them. So I think with these 5 things, it was a very, it was an immersive experience. It wasn't the same as being in a home, but I think it was as close as we could get. And we now have the information that we need to move into more tangible brainstorming and figuring out what we want to do in these product categories. So it'll be interesting over the next year or 3, 4, 5 years to see what of this past year sticks and what continues to evolve. So it'll be interesting to hear from everyone else though, like what things have you found that have been helpful. So for interviewing specifically, Jill, what has changed for you?
Well, we go from the side of things where we're talking face to face, like we just talked about, that importance of engaging and being with everyone, to now going to that virtual connection. And, of course, as we move through this transition, what does stick and doesn't stick. One thing is for sure, we still have to have communication and connection no matter what, even if it does look a little different. So there are some cons that come with that. What used to be that face-to-face interaction is now face-to-computer screen. And sometimes it can look exactly like this picture. Blank places, flat screen, no emotion, naturally zero connection, if you will. That's because we're all stuck behind a screen. A lot of times distractions are there, things that we wouldn't normally have. Family members also in the home. You may be working from home, but you also have kids that are having to do their homework, or you're trying to work around your spouse and do all that sort of stuff. And that can be challenging. It can be hard to hear, see, connect if you don't have the proper equipment and technology. I mean, it can be super frustrating. People then shut down and just stop their interaction, their connection altogether. And that can be hard to do. People hide behind their screens if they will too. So you kind of miss on some of those nonverbal cues that you normally would have when you're in person. But we can always turn some of those cons into pros as well. So some pros, is just that human factor. We already saw that this morning when we had a presenter not be able to present. And we have things like learning how to share our screen properly. And again, that technology side of things. I'm muted, I'm not muted. What's going on? When the pandemic first started, data actually showed that the most words used were continuity, flexibility, resilience, and adversity. All words that kind of allude to a challenge. But now the main words used are more human. Friend, kindness, connectivity, and compassion. And so the data shows now there's an increase in recognition and support among our peers. And we can use that forgiveness factor, if you will. We're all in this together. We're all human. We're going to have mistakes. There's that random family member that walks behind you, not realizing your video's on. Hopefully they're clothed fully, and that's okay there. Interruptions that happen. But again, we kind of makes us into all being on the same team, if you will. We're all experiencing the same thing, and we can be forgiving. And that being said, I don't know if we can do a show of hands here or not, but who actually has on pants that, maybe match what you have on the top half of what we can see? Who's wearing pants? Be honest. Or wearing something that you would normally wear to a conference. Probably not everyone or most of you all are doing that. So we can take this opportunity and embrace it and do things that you wouldn't normally do. Obviously, be more comfortable in what you're wearing on some things, not just wearing pants, but having notes around, writing down, having specific things available to you that you wouldn't normally do if you are sitting face to face with someone. And so interviewing can be a little bit more challenging, but also on this side of things, again, turning that con into a pro, while you may be behind a screen, sometimes that screen does give the freedom to, Bill's wearing gym shorts and sneakers. I love it, Bill, thank you. I have on yoga pants, I'll be honest, okay? But anyways, there's that freedom sometimes with that screen in place. It does allow people to maybe open up a little bit more. They feel there is that buffer as opposed to sitting face to face with someone. And sometimes it gives them a little bit of a barrier, if you will, to then open up. And that's really where that third-party person can come in and help so that we can connect all of these pieces, because it is a little bit different and it's a little bit harder with that connection. But again, when there's no bias, there's no consequences for opening up and doing all of that. This third party can really come in and kind of fill those missing pieces, if you will, complete that connection so that you can make sure that your culture stays positive and strong. Actually, Simon Sinek had a quote in a live stream that he did. In a weak culture, people will hunker down and protect themselves. In a strong culture, people will show up and take risks and take care of each other. And so, as this pivot is happening, it's not going anywhere. The whole point of research is to learn new things. It's meant to challenge us and find new ways or solve problems and do new things. So as we continue to research, we need to accept that challenge and change our research strategies, perhaps, to adopt and adapt to this new world, if you will. But we also need to challenge ourselves to do the same.
So
thank you. Yes.
Be happy to connect and talk further about any of these topics. Feel free to reach out to us personally. And I did see a couple of questions come through. Let me see if I can find them.
Yeah, there's one person that said, how do you record audio visual for the visits? And do you ever have clients listen in, join live remotely?
So it's always, if it's a quick video of someone like doing something, then I might use my phone. But usually I have feels like it's old-fashioned now, but an actual video camera set up on a tripod in the corner to record the whole thing. And that's because usually I'm not recording verbatims, but I might want to come back and visit them later. So, but I will also say an extension cord is one of the most important things you need to have, because you never know where the outlets are going to be. And so a video camera on a tripod is how I've done it. And no, I haven't had clients listen remotely. It's probably possible now. You could probably do a Zoom call easily from somebody's house, but I haven't done that yet. But it'd be interesting to try, though.
And then the other question from Jessica Kane came in and said, how big is your team? Do you have any tips for scaling among very small teams such as 2 persons?
How big is my research team?
Mm-hmm.
So there's 2 of us. Up until November, we didn't have a formal research department within SureTape. There's a lot of research happening, kind of ad hoc, kind of through our marketing communications group. I was doing it through R&D, but also serving the marketing functions as well. Usually our marketing teams would reach out to a consultant a lot of times, or an agency, just to run their own research. So we didn't have a formal, structured way to really collect all of our research, and there was some stuff that was happening that was overlapping or just redundant or just being missed. So in November, that's when we formalized the research department, and we are on the innovation team. It's an insights and innovation team. So there's 2 of us, and we're managing research for our entire business, which is a consumer business, it's an industrial business, it's also international, and also engineered solutions. So it's a lot. Our budget isn't huge right now. I feel like it's actually the right size budget for 2 people to manage, but there's just 2 of us. So it's a small but mighty team. We do have a really high level of engagement with the marketing team, I would say specifically.
Mm-hmm.
As far as scaling, I mean, I don't know what the challenge would really be with. I feel like if everyone is bringing people on the ride and on the journey, I think it'd be. I don't know what there would be a barrier to scaling that, but I'm happy to talk further specifically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think maybe with small teams, you just have to find a person that can fit a lot of different roles. But other than that, yeah. So that's interesting. So when you first came on, you were not really doing qualitative research, and then you kind of morphed into that role at your own direction. Is that right?
Sort of, yes. I mean, we're a pretty scrappy company, and research is always treated very scrappily.
It's duct tape. I mean, you guys got to be scrappy.
Yeah, exactly. It really comes with the territory.
Yeah.
We don't have, so it's fun. We do it ourselves. So when I started, I was hired in an innovation role, loosely defined. And also I was reporting into I sat with the consumer business in Cleveland, but I was reporting into the industrial business in Hickory, so it's kind of a little weird that way. But there was attempts to do research, attempts to do field work, attempts to send samples out with field sales and get feedback, and she never really got the good feedback. So early on, I had suggested to our vice president, we could spend $3,000 to $5,000 and do a contractor study, and I had to continue to ask, and finally we got that contractor study done, and then we started doing in-home research with our weatherization category, which is drafts, and it's seals for windows and doors. So that was the first time that it was me leading this actually with our consumer business. So I feel like slowly it kind of grew, and then we have an internal panel called Team Care that it's like 100 people across the company that has opted in to be part of this panel that can try products anytime. So I was sort of running that as well, and it just kind of grew from there. So it was kind of organic growth, I guess. And it was back to the skills that I had learned the previous 10 years with the design firm. So, but yeah, I would say it kind of organically grew, and that became 75% of my job at a certain point, even though I was part of R&D.
And do you still outsource for most quantitative type research, or do you not really do as much quantitative?
Yes, I mean, we do some in-house, not much, especially now that it's just 2 of us doing so much, and we have a real budget now, so we do most of our research outsourced. We do have a company omnibus that we just started a couple months ago, though, so we do have a way for people to throw these random questions into a survey in kind of a methodical way. And that was something we had to kind of reel in too, because I was used to doing all this one-off research. So now we have a way to submit questions on a quarterly basis. So we do some. We do very little quant in-house. We do very little qual in-house really anymore. A lot of it we do our partner with different agencies.
Gotcha.
I'm just going to chime in here. With a small team like that, being very open with each other of who has what strengths and utilizing those. Someone may be very detailed, and that's the person that you want to handle those finer points, whereas someone may be more macro-minded, if you will, and then utilize that. So I like to call it, everybody has a seat on the bus, and be in your seat and own it and do it. But you have to have that first conversation of being very open and very honest with, hey, this is what I'm really good at and I enjoy doing versus, I'll do it all, don't get me wrong, but this is where my strengths are. So use those, because that can really play a big role in whatever you're doing, whether it be research or any role really within the company.
Yeah, great. All right, we don't have any other questions that have come in. You guys have any other comments you want to throw out there before we finish up?
No presentation from you would be a presentation without me, without a few book recommendations. So I do want to recommend these two books. First, on the left, Switch is a great book for change management. The idea with this book is that it's not about formally being in charge. If you're a vice president, you're a group director, you may not really need this, but you're welcome to read it. But it's not about formal power structures. It's more about leading from where you are and how you can influence change even when you're not the boss. So I love this book. It's a little bit more like a manual, and I've revisited it a few times. So always recommend that. The second book here is actually a work of fiction, Euphoria. I mentioned before that I would love to live in the jungle and learn and absorb so much from people. And this book is actually loosely based on the work of Margaret Mead back in the 1930s or 40s. But it's a really great account, a little love triangle. But if you love the idea of doing real ethnographic, anthropological research, and also just love to read, I recommend this book as well. So
nice.
I'm always good for book reviews. So yeah, I would encourage anyone to reach out though. Feel free to link with us, and we're always happy to chat through any challenge you're having.
Perfect. All right. Well, thank you so much for your time. I really enjoyed it. And everybody else, stand by, and we'll be back in a few minutes.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Bye.
Thanks so much.